Okay, so is Israel committing war crimes in Gaza? Everybody's talking about war crimes, the UN, Al Jazeera, people on the streets and the protests. So in this video, we're going to examine from an objective perspective whether Israel is actually committing war crimes during its operation right now in Gaza. Now, this question is very, very simple, and yet it is very, very complicated. War is horrible. War is bad. War is hell. Urban warfare is 10x hell. In war, civilians die. In urban warfare, civilians die a lot more. In fact, according to statistics we have from Mosul and from the Fallujah battles, the ratio of dead civilians to dead combatants in an urban warfare scenario is 9-1. So 90% of deaths in an urban warfare scenario are unfortunately civilians, and that is horrific. Make no mistake about it. But emotions play no part in this. The amount of civilians dead play no part in this. It is a legal question whether the Israelis are actually carrying out war crimes in Gaza right now. Is it horrible that civilians are dying? Yes, 100%. Should it be avoided at all costs? 100%. But the real question here is divided into 4 subjects. And I want to thank my good friend John Spencer, who literally wrote the book on urban warfare, for helping me through these and making me understand exactly how the question should be answered from an analytical perspective. I'm going to put a link to his profile on X and his book and his article on this specific topic, which I think you all should read. But let me just kind of summarize it from 10,000 feet. So the question is divided into 4 aspects. And failure in one of these 4 aspects leads us to the conclusion that Israel is committing a war crime. So aspect number 1 is basically justification or military necessity, whatever you want to call it. The question, first of all, has to be answered. Was Israel justified in going to war with Gaza? Was it militarily necessary for Israel to invade Gaza? Now that question is very, very simple. All you have to do is look at Article 51 of the UN Charter. Once Gaza, through its government, which is the Hamas, since 2005, attacked Israeli civilians, hijacked, took hostages, raped, killed, did unthinkable things to the Israeli civilians, Israel was in full power and obligation and duty to go to war with Gaza. This is Article 51 of the UN Charter. So military necessity and justification for Israel to go to war were all there. Nobody is claiming otherwise. I don't think that's the point where people are going crazy saying, oh, it's a war crime. I think the problem is in the other 3 elements. So the second element is proportionality. And here's where I think everybody gets mixed up. A lot of people died on the October 7th massacres. 1,400 people, mostly civilians, died on the Israeli side. Almost 10,000, if you believe the Hamas, died in Gaza. And let's assume that number is correct. And let's assume all of them were civilians, which is also questionable. So you have 8 times more people dying in Gaza than in Israel. Does this mean that Israel is accused of war crimes and should be seen as committing war crimes? Well, not necessarily, because proportionality isn't the amount of civilians that have died. Proportionality is something different. It is viewed in one simple way. How much civilian death will your activities cause versus the military objectives that it will achieve? If I want to kill one soldier, one Hamas soldier, and that one Hamas soldier is basically in the kindergarten and it's surrounded by 50 kids, that is not proportional. This is exactly what we're talking about here. This is proportionality. What is the amount of military gain? What is the amount of damage to civilians? Now, since the Hamas admittedly embedded all of its facilities, and we have video proof of this, in kindergartens, in pools, in community centers, in schools, in hospitals, in mosques, rocket launchers, weapons warehouses, headquarters, actual military bases, sniping stations. We have evidence of them actually sniping from a tower in the mosque. So once Hamas embedded all of its operations inside civilian population, there's no Hamas bases that are not inside apartments, inside neighborhoods. Once the entire command center of Hamas is in tunnels underneath these civilian infrastructure, This is 100% within the realm of proportionality. We have not seen any evidence of Israel actually targeting one simple soldier in a trade-off of 300 civilians. We haven't seen that evidence. We've seen a lot of civilian death, but we also have reports from Israel that they've killed over 5,000 Hamas militants. We have reports of destruction of significant infrastructure by Hamas, by them hurting significantly the command chain of Hamas. We have lists of names. So Israel have taken significant military strides. They've progressed. We've seen the military achievements. They've come at a great cost, but the proportionality, unfortunately, in the cold analysis is there. Now, the next thing is distinction. Now, the question here, was Israel targeting civilians on purpose? Now, we don't have any evidence of Israel actually targeting civilians. In fact, we have evidence of the opposite. We have evidence of Israel dropping leaflets and flyers, millions of them, telling people to evacuate. They've said it on TV. They're literally calling people in the neighborhoods, telling them, hey, we're going to bomb in this neighborhood. You better evacuate. We have documentation of many, many calls. We had this story just a few days ago. They called a dentist, basically telling him, hey, go around the neighborhood, tell them we're going to bomb here in a few hours. And he did. So we have proof of the Israelis actually trying to minimize civilian casualties. We have video footage of people evacuating on the main road of Gaza from the north to the south, surrounded by Israeli tanks. Nobody's firing at the civilians. So there is no evidence to point out to targeting of civilians. In fact, we have evidence to point out to Israelis trying to minimize civilian casualties. So again, 3 out of the 4 are completely not there. Now you can make an argument that maybe Israel isn't being honorable and isn't fulfilling the humanity element of war by depriving Gaza of gasoline and fuel and diesel. But hey, Israel has been providing over 500 trucks of food, and it's been pumping water to Gaza and been providing them with the means to survive. Israel was not providing them gasoline, admittedly, because this is used for military purpose by Hamas. And they have evidence of Hamas trying to get fuel and gasoline for its generators to allow them to stay on the ground, to ventilate these tunnels. So this is a military purpose. Gasoline is not a necessity of life, like water and food. The IDF and the Israeli government are under no obligation to provide gasoline to their enemy. That is not a war crime. I think that it would behoove all of us here who actually give a damn about facts and objectivity and truth and are not emotional about this and actually care about the reality, not to go down the route, oh, this is horrible, something must be done. And instead go to the, okay, let's go through the due process and let's look at this legally. Is there any evidence that Israel is committing war crimes here? And if yes, they should be punished. And if not, enough with this argument. Simple as that.